In today's presentation, we will be talking about the life of Stephen Sondheim. Stephen Sondheim is a name that is known throughout the music world, an amazing composer that if you didn't even know who he was, you would be sure to recognize one of his pieces of works, some of which might even surprise you. Sondheim has a life that was influenced by the idea of music theatre as we know it. He was mentored by many famous composers such as Oscar Hammerstein II and Richard Rodgers. Throughout this presentation, we will look back at the extraordinary life and works that created a revolutionary age in theatre around the world as we know it. Sondheim has been working with music throughout all his life. He worked with many noted composers and artists up until he had his first big break. His first well-recognized work was writing the lyrics to go along with Richard Rodgers' musical Do I Hear a Waltz in 1965. He started catching the eye of many composers and theatregoers after he had written this music. His work continued to flow throughout the years. Sondheim became an even bigger name in the theatre scene when he co-wrote the musical and lyrics to the all-time favourite musical, West Side Story. He was then further pushed into the theatre scene as he ended up creating over 10 more shows that found their way onto Broadway. And you can clearly see that majority of these musicals have been done through amateur productions, school plays, and some that are still even on Broadway to this day. While creating an abundance of well-structured and groundbreaking shows, Sondheim was revolutionizing the new age of theatre. He was changing the idea that jazz theatre would still be a thing, and he started changing it into the golden age of theatre, or as it's also known, the legit era of theatre. One of his most well-known works that has changed the idea of how Broadway would be seen would be Company. Company broke the stereotypical Broadway musical mold and opened the door to so many more opportunities. The story of Company follows the life of a group of friends in relationship and their bachelor friend, Robert, and it follows the stories and emotions of love. Sondheim used all different types of music genres throughout this musical, which hadn't been seen coming from an era of predominantly jazz. His ideas of bringing something as a contemporary piece of music wouldn't have been seen until the 1990s. However, he decided to mix the idea of contemporary jazz and a classical touch to create something that had never been seen in music theatre at all throughout this time. In the time that Sondheim began writing his music, it was a time that set melodic ideas to one simple idea, a monophonic melodic idea. This is where Sondheim became very revolutionary in the way he worked. He began writing polyphonic melodic ideas, which created a new idea for composers around the world. An amazing example of this can be heard in one of the quartet pieces from Sweeney Todd. In this piece, there can be example lines heard in a way he created the difference between characters on stage. More than just to have characters in costume and continuously change to show their emotions with another character, he was able to use the tonality and musicality of the performers' voices to distinguish who they were and how they felt through the song and their own idea from a melodic idea. And you can hear that change and you can see how they interact with each other on stage. He continued this throughout his musical, as well as some of the polyphonic melodic ideas he wrote have stayed around until this day. A really good example of this would be Not Getting Married Today from Company. You can hear these different melodic ideas very clearly as it starts with an operatic section that repeats throughout the song. This then leads into the very popular Patter song section that is used to express the feelings of a character on her wedding day. And you can see how he used that to show the thoughts running through her head, which is a large contrast to the warming and calm operatic tones that completely explain a different side of the story on a wedding day. One side shows the bride not wanting to get married, second guessing herself and continuously running around trying to get ready, whereas the other operatic section shows how or the guests are feeling like it's a nice day, it's going to be a wedding. And you can see that really well in this clip here.
With the other garbage, I'm not well. You've been swell, but I'm not getting married. Clear the hall, because I'm not getting married. Thank you all, but I'm not getting married. And don't tell Paul, but I'm not getting married today. Slipping down the drain, and glass this deep.
So you can see that very clearly in that piece and how he revolutionized the way he would use that. And that really came from the composers that inspired him the most throughout his life. So he didn't only just use an array of different and new music techniques. He used little hints of composers he had been influenced by throughout his music. He stated many times that he's been inspired by Bach and Brahms, and he tried to use the characteristics they held in their music as much as possible as he could in his. And something that can be picked up on, is that the Grecian chorus, it was even in that small little bit, you could see the chorus off to the side, and he wanted to maintain the strong and powerful melodic ideas that these composers revolutionized with their pieces of music. So Sondheim has not only nurtured the new ages of theatre, but he's also mentored and inspired as many young composers and performers as he could. Sondheim mentioned in an interview with the ABC in 2007 that due to his growth in music was due to being mentored by amazing composers, and he wanted to pass on the knowledge and wisdom that he held from those composers to new performers, young composers, anyone he could who wanted to learn. And a really good example of his mentorship was to Lin-Manuel Miranda, who wrote the smash hit musical Hamilton. And he stated that he seemed very cautious about the idea of having a musical that was as bold and as new of a concept, containing rap and hip hop and contemporary and classical elements all into one. But he then went on to say he somehow knew it would work because he had looked at it and how Lin-Manuel Miranda was able to write and produce his music and make sure it flowed really well. And a really good example of using a polyphonic idea that Sondheim really brought into the music theatre age was in Non-Stop from Hamilton. There are so many lines going on and so many melodic ideas for each distinct character, and you can hear that, and it still works really well. So Sondheim has really been a face of music theatre for many years in the past and will undoubtedly hold that title for many years to come. His revolutionary style and mind brought a much needed refreshment to the theatre world, and his works continue to inspire many young performers around the world. And Sondheim will always be someone who reinvented the music theatre world. Thank you for listening.